Welcome to Tibet this week. We bring you news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. The headlines of the week. His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration saddened by passing of Pope Francis. Sikyong joins discussion on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's new book. Sikyong concludes visit to Shimla, Kumrao and Satuan. Tibetan Parliament demands probe into suspicious death of Tulku Hungkar Dorjee Rinpoche. Estonian parliamentarians visit Office of Tibet in London. Representative Karma Singey attends Tibetan Unity Cup and Cultural Meet in Nowra, New South Wales. Home Secretary attends high-level meeting on Tibetan land lease in Shimla. Jamyang Lophel Sunday School in Brussels celebrates 10th annual cultural activity. Tibetan Scholarship Program 2026 preliminary round completed. Bharat Tibetan Sangh Gujarat hosts Tibetan medical camps in Rajkot. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has expressed deep sorrow over the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis earlier this week. In a condolence letter to Archbishop Leopoldo Girelli, the Apostolic Nuncio to India, His Holiness the Dalai Lama extended his heartfelt sympathies to Catholics around the world. He praised Pope Francis as a leader known for compassion, humility, and a life dedicated to the service of others. His Holiness added that the best way to honor the Pope's memory is by leading warm-hearted lives and helping others in any way we can. Leaders of the Central Tibetan Administration have also sent their condolences over the passing of Pope Francis. In an official letter, Speaker Khenpo Sonam Temple of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile and Sikyong Pempasring of the Central Tibetan Administration praised the Pope's moral leadership and unwavering dedication to peace, social justice and interfaith harmony. They noted his special concern for the poor and his voice for global unity and compassion. To honor his memory, a prayer service was also held at Sikyong Hall in Dharamshala, where Central Tibetan Administration officials gathered to pay tribute to the Pope's legacy. A prayer service was also held on Tuesday offering tribute to the late Pope by the Tibetan community at Suglakang, the main Tibetan temple in Dharamshala. On Wednesday this week, Sikyong Pempasring joined a virtual book discussion on Voice for the Voiceless, the latest book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The event was organized by the Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives and featured Dr. Thupten Jimba, the book's editor and long-time translator for His Holiness, along with former Indian UN representative Shri Dilip Sinha. In his keynote address, Sikyong highlighted His Holiness the Dalai Lama's middle way approach, calling it a balanced and peaceful solution to Tibet's political situation. He pointed out that Tibet's historical status as independent state is a key part of this approach. Sikyong also touched on Tibet's complex history with China, noting that historical records and modern international law show Tibet was never a part of China. He praised His Holiness the Dalai Lama for blending spiritual values with practical leadership and said the Tibetan people have been guided and prepared since 1960s.
I'm always amazed at how His Holiness combines his spiritual thinking with the political objectives that he has set in this world, which are very often we see a lot of contradictions. But His Holiness has always managed to seamlessly combine his spiritual thinkings with the realities of today and then come out with solutions for not only Tibet, but also for humanity as a whole. And going forward, of course, His Holiness prepared us from 1960 onwards. His Holiness introduced democracy not even 1 year after coming into exile. And today, me as Sikyong, as the democratically elected political leader of the Tibetan people, it is unimaginable, even on my part, for an ordinary person like me to be in this position as Sikyong. and be governing the Tibetans in exile and advocate for the cause of Tibet. So this is all because of the blessing of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the foresightedness of His Holiness leadership that has brought us to this level.
Dr. Thupten Jinpa later shared deep insights into the book and His Holiness the Dalai Lama's vision drawn from his close work with His Holiness over the years. Sikyong Pemba Tsering, who also served as Kalun for Department of Health Central Tibetan Administration, on the same day paid courtesy call on India's Minister of Ayush, Shri Pratap Rao Ganpat Rao Jadhav. During the meeting, Sikyong highlighted the ongoing efforts to strengthen traditional Tibetan medicine or Sowa Rigpa and sought support for its practitioners under the provision of the Tibetan Rehabilitation Policy 2014. Sikyong Pemba Tsering recently wrapped up his official visit to North Indian Tibetan settlements in Shimla, Kumrao and Satuan. Following Shimla, Sikyong visited Kumrao Tibetan settlement where he met with local institutions and addressed public concerns about land leases and dwindling population in settlements. He announced plans to provide housing to 1,800 newly arrived Tibetan refugees. Reaffirming the middle way approach, Sikyong stressed the need for unity among Tibetans and highlighted the US government's ongoing support for Tibetan cause through the Resolve Tibet Act. The Tibetan Parliament in exile has issued a strong appeal calling for an international investigation into the certain and suspicious death of Tulku Rinpoche Hungkar Dorjee Rinpoche in Vietnam. The Tibetan Parliament in exile urges the Vietnamese government, international human rights bodies and the global Tibetan community to press for a thorough and transparent investigation. Rinpoche, a highly respected spiritual leader and head of Lungwe Monastery in Tibet, reportedly died while in Chinese custody in Vietnam late last month. However, the exact circumstances of his death remain unclear, raising serious concerns. The Office of Tibet in London welcomed Estonian parliamentarians Andi Polamets and Evelyn Polamets, member of Estonian Parliamentary Tibet Support Group, during a two-day visit ahead of Easter weekend. Representative Siring Yangi briefed them on the office's ongoing work and encouraged the members of parliament to consider hosting a Tibet-focused conference in Estonia and to support Tibet-related legislation. The parliamentarians expressed a keen interest in deepening their engagement with Tibet-related issues and hope to visit Dharamshala in the future to further strengthen support for the Tibetan cause. Around 100 young Tibetans from across Australia gathered in Nowra, New South Wales over the Easter weekend for the 13th Tibetan Unity Cup and the 2nd Inter-Tibetan Weekend Schools Cultural Meet. Representative Karma Singey of the Office of Tibet Canberra as the chief guest praised the event for promoting Tibetan culture and thanked parents and teachers for their support. The Tibetan Unity Cup, now in its 13th year, is the leading sporting event for young Tibetans in Australia. It brings together youth to build friendships, celebrate identity and strengthen community ties through sports and culture. 19 teams participated in this year's tournament, with Newcastle winning the Unity Cup, while Sydney Chisholm and Newcastle girls team claimed the basketball titles. On Wednesday this week, Secretary Paltin Thundu from the Department of Home, the Central Tibetan Administration, attended an important high-level meeting in Shimla. Convened by the Chief Secretary of Himachal Pradesh, Shri Prabodh Saxena, the meeting focused on challenges faced by Tibetans regarding land lease renewals in the state. The meeting was held as a follow-up to recent visit of Sikyong Pemba Tsering to Shimla. Following the discussions, the Chief Secretary announced that the proposal would be forwarded to the State Cabinet for final approval. He also instructed relevant departments to submit the necessary documents and proposals as soon as possible. Senior officials from the Himachal Pradesh government were also present, including Additional Chief Secretary for Forests, Shri Kamlesh Kumar Pant, the Principal Secretary for Urban Development, Shri Devesh Kumar, and the Additional Secretary for Revenue, Shri Balwan Chand. The Tibetan community in Belgium came together in Brussels on Saturday last week to mark the 10th annual children's cultural activity organized by Churi Sikyong Jamyang Lophel Sunday School. Secretary Chile Wangdu from the Office of Tibet Brussels attended as chief guest. The event featured colorful performances by students from 6 Tibetan schools across Belgium, highlighting their commitment to preserving Tibetan language and culture in exile. The Department of Education of the Central Tibetan Administration has completed preliminary round for the 2026 Tibetan Scholarship Program. Written tests including General Tibetan Exam and the TOEFL institutional tests were held in Delhi and Bangalore this week. Out of 79 eligible candidates, 65 took part, and the top 30 scorers will now proceed to the final interviews scheduled for May 20th and 21st in Dharamshala. Following the interviews, 6 finalists from India and Nepal will be chosen to pursue higher education in the US in 2026. This prestigious program, supported by the US Department of State and administered by the Tibet Fund in partnership with Central Tibetan Administration's Department of Education and the US Embassy in New Delhi, has empowered Tibetan students for over 30 years. From July 2024 to April 2025, the Rajkot branch of Bharat Sangh organized 10 Tibetan medical camps with support from Bharat Sangh Gujarat and the India-Tibet Coordination Office. These camps provided free consultations and traditional Tibetan treatments to over 1,020 patients, especially helping those with limited access to healthcare. Tibetan doctors Dr. Thar and Dr. Tenzin Namdal played a key role by offering their expertise. To improve efficiency, the organizers introduced advanced registration, a helpline, and faster consultations, reducing wait times. The camps were coordinated by Sri Rajesh Patlia with support from Bharat Sangh Gujarat leaders and local community members. All events took place at the central Rajkot location, drawing strong public participation. That is all for this week. See you next week.